to Legally Speaking. My name is Natasha Sarah Lorraine, and I'm an attorney here in Atlanta, Georgia, practicing labor and employment law. But my most important role today is being your host for today's episode, which is sure to be a thrilling conversation. Legally Speaking is brought to you by the Georgia Association of Black Women Attorneys, also known as GABWA. GABWA is a volunteer bar association who advocates for women and children and the empowerment of our communities. This episode is not intended to give legal advice, so if you feel that you are encountering a legal concern, please consult with an attorney. Today, we will explore the hows and whys of nonprofit board leadership and service. So if you aspire to serve on a board of directors for a nonprofit organization, this episode is just for you. Our guest today is not only a trailblazing legal professional, but she's also a pillar of her community who has a heart for service and social justice. Her resume is decorated with years of nonprofit service. We're so excited to have with us here today, Mrs. Terica Redfield Gansey.
Thank you, Natasha.
You are welcome. Terica is the Deputy Director for the Southern Center for Human Rights, where she focuses on elevating their mission, assisting the Executive Director with strategic partnerships and initiatives, and strategies and programs. She's also the President for the Board of Directors for the Georgia Legal Services Program, and also serves as a member for the Board of Directors for the Center for Death Penalty Litigation. Welcome again.
Thank you.
You are welcome. So before we dive into today's discussion, we want to first define a few terms. So for those who are unfamiliar with what a nonprofit organization is, it is a charitable, tax-exempt organization that operates to further a social cause and or provide a benefit to the public. And I would be remiss not to mention GABWA's 501c3 nonprofit charitable organization, the Georgia Association of Black Women Attorneys Foundation. Now, nonprofit organizations are typically led by a board of directors. The board of directors is the governing body of the organization that oversees the organization's business and activities. So, Terica, would you add more to that, or would you say that pretty much defines the terms nonprofit and board of directors?
I think that pretty much defines the terms nonprofit and board of directors. I would just emphasize the nonprofit part of that, of the name, in terms of sometimes people try to compare a business, a for-profit business with a nonprofit organization, and they both need money. The difference is how they use the money or what the motivation is. So nonprofit organizations' mission is driven by funding, whereas with for-profit companies, the main goal is to make a profit.
Right.
And that's not to say that nonprofits don't need money. If they don't have a surplus year over year, they're at risk of going out of business. So I just want to clarify that nonprofit does not mean no money whatsoever. It just means that our focus is on our mission, and we seek funding to help us achieve that mission.
Okay. So I think that helps us segue into the first part of our conversation, knowing your mission. And I figure at some point in your life, you knew your mission because you realized that you had a passion for nonprofit service early on. And I'm curious to know, at what point did you realize that you had a passion for nonprofit service? Did it start when you were a child, or tell me more about that?
So I can't say that it started when I was a child. What I will say about my childhood is that I've always been the kind of person, even as a kid, who wanted to help people, who cared about social justice. I remember, watching the Feed the Children commercials and being like 8 and crying because I wanted to help. Or
the telethons.
Yes. Or hosting canned food drives as a high school student, volunteering at homeless shelters as a college student. I knew that I wanted to do social justice work. It was while I was in law school that I realized that the proper path for me to do what I wanted to do, what I was passionate about, was nonprofit service. When I was 8, I didn't know the difference between nonprofit or any other kind of profit.
Right.
So, but I knew who I was, and I learned eventually that nonprofit service was where I wanted to be for my career and for my personal life.
Okay. So you said it started in law school. Was there a particular organization that you volunteered with that really piqued your interest or that you joined?
Yeah, so first of all, I didn't know that I wanted to do death penalty defense work until I volunteered with the Virginia Capital Representation Resource Center in Charlottesville, Virginia. And I just got
Shout out to UVA Law. You went
yes,
to UVA
yes,
Law.
wah, wah. So I just got so intrigued by the speaking, being in someone's living room and talking to them about what happened at trial and realizing that there was so much trauma involved in capital punishment. And then I started studying more about capital punishment, and I just really got angry. I got angry at the racism, the sexism, the classism involved in it, and I came to realize that this is what I wanted to do with my career.
So let's talk about how important it is to seek out nonprofit organizations that align with your life mission. I mean, you talk about how you had a passion for this and it just really struck a chord with you. And what are the pitfalls of people choosing nonprofit organizations for resume building versus finding something that really aligns with their purpose?
Well, I think there's pitfalls for everyone involved when that happens. For the organization, if you're accepting board members who really have no interest in your mission, you're not going to get much out of them. And nonprofit organizations need people who are committed and dedicated to the work and who believe in the mission and willing to fight for them and to be the advocates and be ambassadors for them. And for the person who decides that, oh, I think this will be great for my resume, if they're not involved, if they're not committed to the mission of the organization, they won't be committed to doing the work.
Right.
And then if you're a member of a nonprofit board and you're not doing the work, people know. Because there are other members of that nonprofit board. And the odds are if you're not pulling your weight, then you're creating problems for another board member. And reputation, that could impact your reputation in the community and affect your ability to get invited to other boards.
So let's say you've identified the nonprofit organization that matches your life mission and your interests. What is the process for joining a nonprofit board? And I guess I want to start with how important is doing your research on that nonprofit organization and making sure that, you know, this is an organization that has strategic goals, longevity. How do you go about doing that type of research?
If you've identified an organization that you think you might want to get involved with, research is key. First of all, I think before you even do the research, you have to decide, am I the kind of person who would I hire me, and would I invite me to be on the board of this organization?
So you got to do
what
a
do I
check.
bring? Yes, what do I bring? What can I offer? And sometimes for young people, particularly younger attorneys, they might figure, well, I'm not really sure that I can offer anything. But sometimes energy is what a board needs. Sometimes they need a worker bee who's willing to. And so think about how you would sell yourself to the organization and what you could offer for this organization that you say you're passionate about. And the second thing is to really do your research on the organization, and you can do that by going to their website, looking at who who's on the board of directors, who the staff is, what kinds of impact they're having. You can also offer to volunteer with the organization. It's really, really important for you to review the financial documents. A lot of times that's publicly available, so they might have an annual report that indicates how they've been doing over the last year. You can check out their 990 to figure out how they're managing their funding that they're getting. If it looks like they're in the red,
that's a red flag.
Yes, and here or there, a nonprofit might be in the red, depending on you might have made a big purchase or things like that. But if it looks like there's a trend toward you being in the red, that's a red flag that you should really pay attention to, and can really think hard about whether this is a nonprofit that you want to get involved with. Also, ask people. Think about what the reputation in the community is, not just for the organization, but for the people who work there, because it's really critical that a nonprofit organization has competent, effective leadership, and if it doesn't, then you can be putting your own reputation in jeopardy by getting involved with an organization that is not properly performing their role.
Exactly. And so what is the application process? Does it involve typically an interview, or does it vary across organizations?
It varies.
Yeah.
It depends on the various organizations. Sometimes there's an application process where you fill out a form, you send in your resume, you have an interview, things like that. Other times it's a little less formal, still formal. Maybe the board nominating committee has creates a list of people that they think might be good for the organization, and a lot of times they might think about gaps that they have on the board. So, for example, if they don't have enough people who have finance experience or who have communications or marketing experience, they may be looking to fill gaps. And they may have already identified people that they think would be great. And then so the executive director and the board chair or some representative of the board may call up the person or schedule an interview in person or over the phone to really just talk to them about, hey, we've identified you as a candidate for our board. We want to talk to you about whether or not you'd be interested, tell them about what the responsibilities are, and gauge whether or not they feel like they can fulfill those responsibilities. So, but it just really depends on the organization.
Okay. Well, let's dive into talking about you and the good work that you do with Georgia Legal Services Program and the Center for Death Penalty Litigation. So can you tell us a little bit about your role as the president of GLSP and just talk a little bit about the good work that y'all are doing?
Yes. So I've been the president of Georgia Legal Services Board of Directors for a year and a half now. And I came on as board president at a time of transition. So first, let me tell you what we do. We create access to justice and opportunities out of poverty for rural Georgians. So in all of the counties outside of the metro Atlanta counties, we work for civil legal services for rural Georgians who are near or below the poverty level. And that is really, really important to who I am because I grew up in rural Mississippi. So I know what it's like to live in an area that doesn't have a lot of access to a lot of things, and not a lot of access to lawyers, not a lot of access to a lot of things. And I know what it's like I didn't grow up poor personally. My parents were teachers, but both of my grandmothers were maids. My grandmother my maternal grandmother is 101 years old. And, she has lots of stories to tell.
I'm sure she does.
So that helping rural people who need access to justice and opportunities is personal to me. And so I feel privileged to be able to serve on the board of directors for Georgia Legal Services Program. And in that role, I lead the organization. I worked closely with the executive director. And so I started out saying that I took over at a time of transition where our long-term executive director, who had been in the position for more than 25 years, retired. And so we had to go through a long process of identifying a new executive director for the organization. It took us a year. I mean, we wanted to get it right. Yeah. We're a huge organization, 10 offices across the state, over 100-something employees. It's just $16 million budget. So we had to get this right.
Right.
And so that was a lot of work. And if I had been the kind of person who just wanted to do this because it was on my resume, maybe I wouldn't have put in the kind of time that I needed to really vet the candidates that we were looking for, to really pay attention to keep the rest of the board members involved and engaged. And so that's really one of the reasons why it's important to love love the mission, to be engaged with the mission, and really to work with the staff and people, because I knew them personally. I've been on the board for a number of years, and I wanted to see them thrive. I wanted to make sure that I was making a decision that was going to positively impact them, but also making sure that we picked someone who would carry the organization forward, not just to continue to do the same things, but to do them as well and even better.
So it sounds like you've had a lot of successes in your years of nonprofit service. Let's talk about the challenges. So, what have some of the challenges been when it comes to serving on a board of directors for a nonprofit?
There have been many challenges. I'm trying to think of some to talk about. One of the things that I think that emphasizes how much you should research before you join a board, or really do a gut check even while you're on the board, is that I had an experience where I was newly joining this board, and they had just hired a new executive director. The executive director was not who the organization needed that person to be.
Okay.
And it became very clear really early on. But I stayed on the board because I was committed to the organization. I had worked for the organization. I knew how important it was.
Yeah.
I was trying to fight for it. But really, I should have just resigned from that board. And so I cautioned people to really do a gut check, not just before you get on the board, but even after you get on the board and you decide that something's not quite right and I don't think I can fix it,
Right.
then you should protect your own reputation
Okay.
and do a gut check
Yeah.
and decide maybe this is not for me.
Yeah.
But generally, the complaints I might have with serving on the board is probably other board members not pulling their weight or things like that. I mean, it's life, you know. So that's why I caution people when I talk to them about if we're thinking about bringing them on the board, is to really be introspective. It's okay if you say no to us. It's okay if you say,
It's
look,
better to say no.
yes, it's so much better for us if you say no.
Right,
and we
right.
won't hold it against you. In fact, I would consider it a plus in terms of you were thoughtful in your decision making.
And honest.
And honest with us, because if you say yes and then you can't fulfill your obligations, you haven't done any of us a service. And so I really want people to know that it's okay if you're not accepted on the board. Sometimes it's not that they don't want you, it's just that they don't have room for you, or they're looking for different types of skills, or just now is not the right time. And it's okay for you to say no. I'm prioritizing different things. Please keep me in mind for future opportunities.
So let's segue into training programs that may be available for anyone that wants to serve on a nonprofit board. Real quick, what are some resources out there here in Atlanta or in Georgia that someone can pursue?
So I have participated in a number of trainings because I'm the kind of person who doesn't believe I know everything. And I am a continual learner, and I think everybody should be, especially if you want to serve on a board of directors. So the United Way Greater Atlanta chapter has a volunteer involvement program. I think it's a 4-week program. I participated in it years ago, and it's designed to train people who are interested in serving on nonprofit boards. So you learn about the importance of strategic planning. I remember one of our instructors said, if the organization you're considering joining the board of doesn't have a strategic plan, you should think twice, because that means that they're not thinking strategically about their long-term health.
Right, they're not future focused.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so that is a good program that teaches you sort of the nuts and bolts of board governance and finance and things like that, all the things that you will need to know to be an effective board member. And they also help you find nonprofit organizations that might be willing to, who might need your talents. And so they help you get matched with nonprofit boards as well. Another organization is the Georgia Center for Nonprofits.
Okay.
They have weekly trainings. I've participated in so many I can't even count. And they have board-specific trainings, so board governance trainings, but they also have trainings on things like communications or marketing or things like that. And that's important to me, not just because I work for a nonprofit, but because as a board member, I want to be able to chime in on hey, maybe we should think about these kinds of things to advance the organization. Or I might take the accounting class because I'm not so good at the nonprofit accounting part of this, and I want to bolster
That would be me. I'd be in the accounting class.
Yes. and that's really important for nonprofit board members to know about finance. And if you don't know, that's a great opportunity. The Georgia Center for Nonprofits is a great opportunity for you to learn more about that. And I also am enrolled in a certificate of nonprofit management at Georgia State University. So you don't have to get a degree. You can just take classes that at the end of I think I have to take 4 classes, and I'll have a certificate in nonprofit management. But that allows me to go deeper. So instead of spending maybe a day or 2 or 3 or 4 on a particular topic, I'll spend the whole semester. I'll have to write a midterm. I'll have to take final exams and midterm exams. And so I wanted to go deep in terms of what I learned about nonprofits and the way they operate and the way they should effectively operate, so that because I have served in leadership positions on several boards, so that I could be more of an effective leader.
I love it. So it sounds like there are several resources out there for our members to consider if they want to be a part of a nonprofit board.
Yes, and there also are online opportunities. So you can just Google nonprofit board governance, and there are a number of different things that will come up that you can sort of educate yourself at home.
Okay. So do you have any last-minute thoughts to share about nonprofit service?
One thing that I think I forgot to mention earlier on when I was talking about researching nonprofits is to remember to ask about directors and officers' liability insurance. The organization should pay for that to cover you in case the organization is sued, so that you can be protected.
That definitely sounds very important. Say that one more time.
Directors and officers' liability insurance.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for all of the insight that you've provided today. This has been an awesome conversation, and I think our members will really appreciate all of the information that you provided. And we want to invite our members to be a part of the conversation. We want to hear from you. So send us your feedback, ask questions, visit our website at www.gabwa.org, visit us on social media. But until next time, we look forward to seeing you again. Thank you so much for being here again, Terica. And until next time, have a good day.